Good morning, and welcome to the Conference Board special webcast on transitions and transformation, how America's veterans are engaging in the workplace. I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today. And before we get started, I just want to take and go over a couple of the administrative rules that would govern if you want to get credit certification for this course from your crediting agency. So the first thing is you can earn credits either through HRCI, SHRM, or CPA. All those are possible, but you have to be online for the entire webcast, and the credit's available only if you participate in the webcast. On slide 2 here, what you can see is the 3 categories of credit, and you can pick which one you want, or you can pick 2 or all 3. But to receive that credit, you must identify and follow the instructions so that you put in your full name, email address, and then specify which course or courses that you want to receive credit for. I'd like to take just a moment and talk to you about who we've got joining us today for the panel. So first, I'll introduce myself. I'm Mike Miller. I'm from the Department of Defense's Personnel and Family Support Center, and we have a role where we oversee 5 different family programs. For this particular focus, what we're concerned about is the Transition of Veterans Program Office, Employer Support, the Guard Reserve, and the Yellow Ribbon Reintegration Program. And I'll talk more about those in a moment. But let's get into the panel members. And kind of the neat thing about this is, in addition to being some really talented people and really good people, we also have a mixture that gives us a nice variety. What I mean by that is we're a joint force. So we've got an Army rep, a Marine Corps rep, and an Air Force rep, and that's pretty cool. So I'll start with the Air Force, and we've got with us John McGarity, the Executive Director for Talent Delivery from USAA. And so, John, could you take just a moment and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what your organization does?
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, Mike. Good morning, everybody from sunny San Antonio. As Mike said, my name is John. I was a 20-year Air Force veteran, retired here in San Antonio, was fortunate to join USAA after my retirement. I have been here for 14 years, or will be 14 years this coming summer. And currently, USAA has responsibility for serving 13 million members who are military veterans, spouses, and their family members. And so we have a very unique and honored privilege to serve our military. I currently have the responsibility within the talent acquisition area, and one of my programs that I'm responsible for is recruiting our military, helping them onboard into employment here at USAA. So thank you for your time today. I really appreciate you all carving out some time and look forward to a great discussion this morning.
Thank you, John. Next, we have Brent Paramner, and he's here as the Senior Director for Military Programs from Walmart. Very happy to have you here, Brent. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike. So I joined Walmart about 4 months ago, left Silicon Valley after 6 years in some early stage activities in both the private sector and some social ventures. Before that, spent 25 years as an infantry officer in the Army, and just proud to be on Walmart's team supporting veterans and military spouses and what they do for our business.
Thank you very much. It really is a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
And then we have our Marine Corps rep. We have Angel Smith with us here. She's the Director of Azure for Government Affairs at Microsoft. Angel, can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Absolutely. So I work over as you said, the Director of Government Affairs for Microsoft. I've been lucky enough to be able to have the collateral responsibility of supporting the Microsoft Software Services Academy, which is a focus, an effort Microsoft focuses on hiring veterans that are departing the service. We also focus on military spouse hiring. And then also we've got a really interesting Youth Spark program. It's also focused on getting the children of service members interested in getting involved in the tech industry, potentially as their career options. So thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to the discussion.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Angel. And again, it's a pleasure to see you and to have you join us today. So before we get into just discussing the space around veteran transition and especially the impact that those veteran employees have in the engagement process, both with their customers and with their fellow employees, to really assist with the bottom line of your companies, just let me talk a little bit about what DoD does and why DoD is even participating in the transition program, why we value it, and what's going on. So the first point there is that every year 200,000 folks are going to transition out of the military. They're going to migrate somewhere, going to go do something, and the majority of them are going to do something different from what they did in the military. And so that population is static. It's going to continue every year, year in and year out. And so it's a target of opportunity. I'll talk about that more in a moment. The way we prepare them for that transition is through a thing called the Transition Assistance Program. And that's a formalized, structured program. And what it does is take and provide basically training and education for them to get out of the service. Now, the interesting piece is that those 200,000 people transition, you see a map in front of you now, out of 185 locations around the globe. And so we've developed this program to give them all a common baseline, if you will, a common starting point. And that's what you'll see on this next slide. This is TAP at a glance. It's 5 statutory days of training, and I won't go into it, but you can read it or you can follow up with this later for more information. Happy to share the details about it. But the bottom line is it's a baseline. We provide general information about DoD and your financial preparation, your resiliency preparation, general information from the Veterans Administration on compensation, benefits, and services. And then we also provide information from the Department of Labor on employment and employment processes, as well as additional training tracks. If you want to take and learn more about credentialing or fellowships or apprenticeships, or more about the general employment overview from the Labor Department, or about entrepreneurship from the Small Business Administration, or about managing your own higher education experience, and DoD runs a 2-day program on accessing higher education. All that's that 5-day statutory thing, but it's just a baseline. We don't give people jobs. We don't put them into college. We don't take and provide what it takes for their housing and their health care and all those benefits, the things that make them productive members of your society. You do. And that's what this next slide kind of talks about. Beyond TAP, TAP is that baseline to get us started. What really makes the military to civilian transition work is all the people in the ecosystem that surrounds it. And that's where you come in, all the folks that are on the line today come in, that provide, whether it's from an employer, a veteran service organization, from an entrepreneur organization, from a for-profit or nonprofit, state and federal, local governments, doesn't matter. They all come together to create an ecosystem that makes transition work. And that's what these companies are going to talk about today, is how they took and created programs, policies that made transition and hiring transition service members, military spouses, veterans work for their company and produce something on the backside that validates that story that we tell, which is that the service members have skills, they have values, they have things to bring to you from the training education experience that will make your company a better place, more diverse, more capable, more operationally sound. That's the story we have documented through research and through anecdotes, but we're now starting to build a narrative from the actual companies that are out there doing this. And so it's great that today we have with us from retail, from tech, and from the finance industry, 3 major players, both nationally and internationally, that can talk to you about how this veteran engagement processes work inside their company to make it better. And so with that, I just want to start, and let's take and just have a couple of questions. So first, let's start, John, if I can start with you. Can you kind of speak to the programs or systems that USA has leveraged to create a successful environment for veteran employee engagement? And would that be, for example, onboarding, affinity groups, mentoring, training, recruiting, marketing? What was the process you used that made things successful in your organization? John.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. Like many companies, we have an employee resource group. We call it VetNet here at USA, that really gives the veterans an opportunity, and spouses, the opportunity to go ahead and connect, and as they transition into USAA, make some connections real quickly and start establishing a network. What we recognize as we are assessing veteran hiring and onboarding was we know veterans come to us with a lot of experience, particularly around leadership. Our country invests a lot of resources into military members developing their leadership skills, and that's regardless of where they are and when they transition out of their military career. So the first term enlistee all the way up to the senior leader that's transitioned after a 25 or 30-year career, all those individuals come to us with leadership experience. What we recognized was that there was a gap that we saw around understanding the business and having business acumen. And so the question we asked ourselves was, how do we close that gap? How do we narrow that gap? Because we know nationally that 1 in 2 transitioning veterans would leave their first employment within the first year. And that's something we wanted to make sure that we had our eye on it from the USA perspective and tried to address that. And we recognized that we could probably help overcome that hurdle by giving them the tools and the understanding of what we were trying to do from a business perspective. We wanted to leverage that leadership that they came to us with. We wanted to tackle that gap that maybe existed on the business side of things. So we created a program that we called Vets Lead, and it was about how do we capitalize on that veteran and their leadership that they have, but filling up that business acumen and closing that gap. Now, like many companies, we also face budget constraints, and we were like, okay, how do we put together this program with little to no budget to do so? So we looked at those programs and trainings that we had in place already, and we said, let's go ahead and leverage those things that exist. So getting into some of the financials and how to understand how the business makes money. How do we develop and innovate here at USA, and what is that process? How do we capitalize on those existing training programs, be purposeful and intentional so that in that first year, we're taking that transitioning veteran, giving them those opportunities to go ahead and experience those and ramp up quickly into the business so that they have that business acumen that we really all want them to have. Now, when we do that, we have to also partner with the business leader, their manager that they're working for, and explain what their value, what they're going to receive by allowing us to take that individual out of their team for a day or 2 or 3 a month to go ahead and devote into this training. And we point to the success that we've had. We have an over 98% retention rate for those individuals who go through this veteran leadership program on the back end of things, that they're sticky with us and they're staying with us. So we've actually narrowed that gap significantly around retention around the first year, but we're also giving them the opportunity to go ahead and ramp up more quickly into the business, which is exactly what the business leader, that person that hired that veteran, is really interested in, because they want to get them up and get them as productive as possible as quickly as possible. And again, this is something that we looked at, what training resources we have. So we weren't trying to build a new car. We're trying to leverage what we had in place and capitalize on that. We've been very, very successful with that.
Well, John, that's exciting. Thank you for sharing, and we really are impressed and grateful for all the great work USA is doing. Brent, can you talk to us a little bit about what Walmart is doing in those spaces and provide some examples as well?
Absolutely. So I think Walmart has obviously a long tradition with supporting the military all the way back to our founder, Sam Walton, and his service within World War II and beyond, and the family that owns the company, their military service, and the many, many members of the military that have found a great landing place in Walmart over the years. More recently, if you remember back in 2008, 9, 10, and the spike in veteran unemployment as they were coming out of the service was reaching double digits, Walmart really took a hard look at that and put together several programs, the Veterans Welcome Home Commitment, the Military Spouse Career Connection since then in 2018, and set some goals, initially 100,000 veterans hired, over a certain time expanded that to 250,000 veterans hired, wanted to add the military spouses to that mix, and just this quarter we anticipate being able to hit that 250,000 mark since that time. And in that same amount of time since 2018, we think we'll be somewhere around 20,000 military spouses hired in the company. That's landed in 2 different locations. Part of that is find a job, and part of that's find a career, because we know that military service members have different aspirations about their futures, and we know that some of them will come in, find a place that helps them bridge into something else, and some of them will find a place that is a more long-term relationship, and we'd love to be able to help the service community in both areas. As we look into the future, though, we recognize that while that was focused on an unemployment problem, we're now looking at something that's a little bit different. If we scan the environment, we think of it's more about economic opportunity and overall well-being, and how we're getting into thinking about those elements and what we can do to shape things programmatically and measure the impact over time. In order to do that, we need to think beyond just the transition of folks out and the day they arrive at Walmart, but what are we doing to help influence and help inform people on their aspirations 6 months prior to leaving the service or a year prior to leaving the service, and the networks that we can create to do that. And then looking into our company after the veterans on board, and what are we doing in the areas of training and education and health and well-being to help improve, again, that overall economic opportunity and well-being aspects through the life cycle of the individual. That's not necessarily exclusive to veterans, but it obviously supports them and their spouses that are our members and our associates, but maybe something that is a benefit to the company as a whole, and in a way to think about how we do this.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing, Brent. Angel, can you talk to us about Microsoft and what's going on in your space?
Absolutely. So I think a lot of the things that we're doing are relatively complementary to what we're also seeing from USA and Walmart. And actually, both of those companies are very close partners with Microsoft in one of the programs that we've got called the Microsoft Software Services Academy. So the program currently targets departing veterans as they're getting ready to depart the service. Essentially, we offer them software training that would make them competitive to work in the tech industry, or at least any industry that's using some type of a technical service. So we have a series of hiring partners, nearly 600 total. Microsoft, essentially what we do is we put them through a training course and put the service members through a training course. And then after that, we put them on, we allow them access to essentially a hiring matrix that is open to all of our different hiring partners across the country, Walmart and USAA being two of our strongest partners in this particular endeavor. What we essentially do is we put their applications on their resumes online. We give all of our hiring partners the ability to take a look at all of the graduates as they're starting to get ready to graduate from the course. And then we set them up interviews, and we're seeing somewhere in the 98th percentile for these service members that are completing the course and then getting employment that typically will end in some form of long-term employment. I think Microsoft's perspective on this population is that the service members are highly skilled, highly qualified, incredibly loyal, reliable population of employees, prospective employees for companies across the country. And we wanted to try to see if we could provide some upskilling in some high need areas, and then also provide other companies inside the country access to this really very talented population. But as we started to kind of get this underway, we started to realize that there was actually another population that was also highly qualified and eager to seek employment, but has the challenge of constant moves, and that's our military spouse population. What we have found is we started a pilot program that would essentially offer the same type of training to military spouses, open up the same hiring partners to access to these spouses, and then give them the ability to seek employment and then potentially move throughout the country also with some of our hiring partners. So, these spouses will finish this course after they're done. They go through the interview process. Potentially they pick up employment with either Microsoft or a company like USAA. And then they're able to look geographically what positions are available. These companies can compete for these spouses. And then they've got the ability to move throughout their career, but also establish some long-term employment, something that has been a huge gap. We've also started a Youth Spark program. So understanding that we've got an employment gap in the tech industry, not just in Microsoft, across the entire tech industry inside of our country. We have the realization that we must start to train this young population for some of the employment challenges that we're seeing in the future, which would be in the tech industry. And so we've started an initiative called Youth Spark that goes out to all the military installations and bases and gives a quick kind of a day camp for some of the young children of service members to get them interested in potential future tech industry. Now, once a lot of these, when we go back to employed populations of Microsoft employees, veterans that we bring on board, we have a series of different programs and different online groups that we make sure that the veterans have access to once they start employment, so that way we can kind of get them connected inside the new population that they're joining. It's a very, very difficult transition, as most service members know. I know that whenever I left the service after 23 years, it was a surprisingly challenging transition. What we try to do is get our service members connected with other service members inside the company and get them actively involved in solving DoD problems. One of the really unique opportunities that Microsoft has is that we've been working with the Department of Defense for over 40 years, and we take on a lot of DoD problems. And so one of the things we try to do is make sure that we allow them opportunities to continue access to the DoD mission while they're after they've transitioned out, to make them still feel that same connection that they have whenever they were actually in the service.
That's fantastic. Thank you for all the good things that Microsoft's doing, Walmart and USA as well. Thank you for the overview, and I think that sets the stage really well for us to now talk more in depth about the actual veteran employee engagement piece of it. So with that, Brent, let's start with you. And can you talk or share some examples or vignettes of how your veteran employees contribute to meaningful and productive engagement with their coworkers and that make the culture, if you would, or the environment more productive within Walmart?
Yeah, for us, we have a formal series of associate resource groups across the spectrum of audiences that you would think in most companies. The one that we use to focus on the veteran community is called Walmart Serves, and it was primarily done at our home office area up until recently, and now we're expanding that out to what we call the field and out to the stores and the clubs and distribution centers throughout the country. And what we're hoping to see with that as it expands is the opportunity to help create a networking opportunity, not just within in the company, but how we hit that edge where we're interacting with our customers and with potential future employees in the veteran community so that they can find a network and get out of that echo chamber of the service, start to see what it's like and just talk business in an informal way about the opportunities for them at Walmart through the mosaic of experiences of others who are in this associate resource group. On the other side and internal to the company, we think that the more we can showcase our internal associates who are great members of their teams and have their coworkers and their managers and their bosses and leaders see and understand that they are veterans and what they bring to the table, then that will plant that seed in their minds that, well, maybe there's a lot more out there just like them that we can bring into our company, and it'll start this cycle of outreach. And I think just finally overall, what it does is it lets the veteran and the military spouse and people from this military community bring a sense of their strengths from their military service into the company and find a place where they can leverage those strengths and by helping to talk to people about leadership and other experiences that they may have had in the service that help people understand and appreciate what they've done beyond just the thank you for your service, but wow, thank you for what you're doing for our company every day, and we're glad you're a veteran and you're bringing those skills to us.
Sure. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Angel, can you talk to how your veteran employees are taking and engaging in the workplace and making their coworkers, your culture, the environment better?
Yeah, it's we've had kind of an interesting experience taking place over the last couple of years inside the tech industry. I'm sure everybody's really familiar with Techlash and what that's looked like from the tech industry, kind of turning on the Department of Defense a little bit. Microsoft took this challenge and said, you know what, we've got a really, really strong veteran population that exists inside of our company. The best way for us to thwart some of these internal threats is to just have our veteran population connect with the population of employees that we have internally to help them really understand what the DoD mission is and why it's so critical for Microsoft as a company to support the Department of Defense. And so strategically, the leadership of the company really saw our veteran population as critical to be able to kind of win the hearts and minds of the population inside of our company that may not necessarily completely understand the DoD mission completely. And what we found was it's been incredibly successful. A lot of the issues that we have internally with some of the young tech industry not necessarily getting behind the DoD mission had more to do with kind of a lack of understanding of what that actual mission looked like, and then just not having a connection with anybody who'd actually served. And so what we've ended up doing was kind of start using the veteran population internally to kind of serve as the conduit between DoD, our non-serving employees inside of the company, and helping kind of close the gap between those two different things. And so with that being said, knowing that a critical component of national defense is going to be the tech industry's role, I would argue that our veteran population has internally helped Microsoft come together as closer family, just because of the experience base and kind of personifying what Microsoft's role is actually in national defense and why it's so important.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Angel, and thank you for what Microsoft is doing. John, can you add the flavor of USAA and what your veteran employees are doing there to make the place better for all?
Thanks, Mike. With our mission serving the military members and their families, it really helps sharpen our focus on what we're trying to achieve. And we also have more than 1 in 5 employees who are either veterans or spouses. And so we have built into the organization not only the mission, but also a great resource to help keep the mission top of mind. And we do a variety of things, so you all can see that I'm wearing a red shirt. On Fridays, we wear red to remember all those members who are deployed forward. But we also focus in on what does that really mean and what does that look like. So when we think about a member who's deployed forward and who may be in Iraq, we don't forget that spouse that's back here in the States. And that spouse faces some unique challenges. You know, it may be that the water heater, goes out, and now they have home damage to their house, and they're going to be calling back to USAA looking for some help and some support. So we have embedded in our call centers spouses, veterans, who are going to be able to understand exactly what that person is going through with the water heater leak and the damage to the house, and how are we not only going to serve them in terms of meeting that immediate need, but how are we going to also listen to what else is going on in their lives? How are we going to understand what the challenges that they may be facing with their member that's forward deployed and they're at home facing this challenge plus whatever else? So we really tend to really focus in on what that experience is going to be like for that member who is our customer, but is also our member and our owner of the organization. So we really try to build that in. And we are intentional about building that in, just not by wearing red on Fridays, not by striving to have more than 1 in 5 employees who are veterans, but we also are really intentional about leveraging our VetNet, our employee resource group, and helping us to focus in on Memorial Days. What does that, holiday and the sacrifices that brings or calls to mind, what does that really mean for us as people who are serving our military? And then on Veterans Day, there's another very intentional program that we have to really call to mind all those who have served and help us remind who we are and what we're about. So trying to re-ground ourselves into the mission is extremely important, and the VetNet organization, our ERG, helps us to do that, as well as just reminding ourselves what we're really about in our mission that we have as top of mind.
Thank you so much, John. That was very helpful, and it's kind of exciting to hear all the great things that Microsoft and Walmart and USA are doing in this space. I'd like to carry that one step further, and Angel, if we could start with you. And now let's talk about how that comes and really affects your bottom line. How are your veteran employees engaging and improving your relationships with your customers, and through your services and your products, so that they are actually adding to that tangible bottom line? So Angel, can you speak to that for Microsoft?
I sure can. I know we talked a little bit about some of the intangible benefits that you get whenever you hire a veteran employee. And some of the other things, aside from just leadership and reliability, is that we have found that our veteran population are incredibly creative in problem solving. And so a lot of times, as we're in the tech industry, some of the things that we're looking at, we look at problems kind of in a ones and zeros kind of way. Our veterans bring a little bit of color to that, and also kind of they bring this attitude of make it happen, let's figure it out. They look at a problem and they seek solution. They don't necessarily look for more problems. So our veteran population has given us the ability to really kind of look at new and exciting ways on solving some of the hardest problems that exist kind of throughout the world. And the other issue, I know we talked a little bit about leadership, but one of those things, I don't think it's one of those things that you can necessarily completely understate. Their ability to come to the table with leadership capability at all levels is something that I think that most organizations that bring a veteran in realize nearly immediately that you've got somebody who's not necessarily going to just be a really good teammate. They're going to lead. They're going to jump in and take leadership roles in ways that that an average employee that maybe hasn't served just doesn't necessarily have that same type of skill set. They're proactive. They lead from the front, and they turn out to be incredible assets, actually, in areas even, you may hire them for one thing, but what you'll see with our veteran population is that they're really quick to jump into other roles that don't necessarily, that are outside of their job description, that they're eager to help in other ways. And I think it's just part of that whole team mentality that comes from serving in the military.
That's great, and it's great to hear the work they're doing, the work the veterans are doing inside of your space there at Microsoft. John, can you speak to their engagement with your customers there at USAA?
So Angel stole all my thunder. So let me go ahead and anchor on a real specific experience. I think that it'll help folks that are listening to this webinar grasp a little bit of what does that dynamic look like when we bring somebody in, how they can fly it up to something totally unrelated. So I'm thinking about an individual named Val. I met Val probably about 7-8 months ago. We had a conversation and we just started talking. I said, tell me your story. Help me understand where you're coming from. He was like, well, I was enlisted. I was in the Air Force, and then I joined Usaa, and I was in the call center. And he is now a director in our innovation space. And so he has moved from being an enlisted member to being in the call center to now helping lead our innovation that's focused in on our membership, and the ability to, as Angel was talking about, to come in, land in one place, and then transition to something else and take a leadership role. Val has demonstrated that. And so when you're looking for the opportunity for an employee that is engaged, that is willing to take a chance, that is willing to step out, bring their experience that they have, but also help us solve problems, crack those really hard nuts that we can't wrap our head around. Val's, within Usaa, he's a great example of that type of leadership, that type of drive and energy to go in there and just say, hey, I know we've run into this brick wall before, but let's try to take a step back and reassess and think about it from a different perspective and a different angle. And how do we actually, leverage resources, from a different advantage to go ahead and solve problems that we have not been able to solve before. And, I look at that, his story as a great example of what we can actually bring to life and what we can actually expect from military members and spouses as they join our companies.
Hey, that's exciting. Thank you, John. So Brent, are there similar stories or differing types of stories you can share from Walmart's perspective?
Yeah, I think in an aggregation of the stories, one of the things that we found is really interesting for us at Walmart is the values alignment, and going back to what our veterans do for our customers and our bottom line. It really, that foundation of the values you bring in the service very much align with the values that we have at Walmart around respect and service and integrity. When you take those foundational values and then you apply it to where our business is going, and you think about the future of work and the future of retail, it's very much technology enabled, and it centers around machine-enabled tasks that are going on at all levels of our business. And that's almost precisely what happens in the military now, is this very much integrated both technology and human task environments, and you bring that person who has those foundational values, those skill sets that they're able to operate and solve problems in a very complex way and make it look easy. All of that then lets us build trust with our customers every day in the stores through that human interaction, through that efficiency that's gained, build trust with each other and our associates, and then build trust within the communities. And that, more than anything, I think helps contribute to what our bottom line is at the over 4,000 stores that we have across the country, the clubs, the distribution centers, and really within each other in the business to help grow themselves into becoming their best selves and grow the business into what it has the potential to become in the future.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. So we've got time, and we've had a very active question and answer board question board that's been here. So I want to ask a couple questions there, and I'm going to put them up to you just as the group, and we'll, rather than going all the way through, but if you all three want to comment, that's fine. So the first one is from Kevin, and he's asking, how are you eliminating the barriers around pre-screening of resumes applications that are done in most organizations, especially large organizations, by a computer program or some other system in order to get those folks in front of an actual hiring manager for interviews? So how do you break down that very old structured paradigm that isn't necessarily designed to recognize the skills, attributes of your veteran population or your military spouse population? So hands.
I'm happy to hop on this one really quickly, only because it's something. Yeah, we're going through this right now. That's a great question, and it's actually one of those really interesting things. We kind of stumbled on the problem by accident when we were starting to try to recruit pretty heavily for our highly qualified and cleared talent population. Since Microsoft won the JEDI contract, we obviously needed to hire people that had security clearances. We started to realize that a lot of our HR systems were they were screening out a lot of the service members whenever we were trying to hire outside of the typical MSSA population that we would hire from. So we started realizing that our HR system was screening these guys out because they didn't necessarily hit all of the wickets that we needed them to hit in order to be competitive for some of the jobs that we were looking to hire from. And so what we've had to do is change internally some of the things that we're actually looking for. So, maybe you're looking for someone who actually does, who's a coder. Whenever you're doing your HR screening, we're having to add things in that are more military type terms. Like we'll just as a quick example, leadership, or we'll add in some of the highly technical systems that the DoD actually uses. So if we're looking for coding, maybe we'll add a specific type of radio to the search engine, so that way we're trying to like tease out and pull out particular kind of job fields rather than our traditional search engines, if that makes sense. So we've had to change internally the way that we actually screen, and actually the way that we have had to do it, to even dial that back a little bit farther, was we've had to take a closer human look at some of the HR screening. So rather than using some of the systems and the algorithms that would typically pull a resume, we're having to do some of it a little bit more manually, and then spend a lot of time and effort into establishing some of the keyword searches that are actually more aligned with what our service member resumes or CVs have kind of embedded in those. A great question.
Oh, very good. John or Brent, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would like to just add some.
The only thing that I would, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think what Angel said about the blending between what some of your tools and systems do for you on the technology side to vet folks before they come in, and balance that with what the human set of eyes does for it. At Walmart, we have the technology side of things does a pretty good job for us on the find a job portion of things, which is fairly high volume. When we look at the find a career portion of this at Walmart, that's we think is going to be a more expanded question we're going to look at in the next 6 months, year, and whatnot, to really expand that out. And that's going to require that human being to look at that resume to help understand what it is they're looking at when they see some of these things on a resume, and help find that place for them in the business. One of the ways we're doing that is, instead of sending people who are already familiar with these topics to conferences like Value of a Veteran and other conferences, we're going to bring people who have no idea within our talent acquisition community to a lot of these conferences as a deliberate way to help them find out things they didn't know before, get comfortable in a space they were previously uncomfortable, and then bring that back to their recruiters and the broader members of their talent acquisition community to help them understand some of those translation roles. And that's really, we want to blend it into a little bit of both. We want to increase the way we can use the technology and bring in the human being at the point of hiring. Then lastly, we want to use that associate resource group to get out into the communities well ahead of the transition period, or while the individuals that are getting out of the service, military spouses, and create networking opportunities at the 6-month mark or the year mark, and see how they can help shape individuals into taking some of those tasks in their own hands to become the competitive hire that we're looking for in the future. So getting a little bit left of the conversation, if you will.
I think that's an amazing insight, and specifically when you talk about bringing new faces into old conversations. We've kind of started to refer to that as having church meetings where we preach to the choir. So everybody in whatever the gathering is, the convening is already believing and understanding and has experience in this space. And perhaps there's value, as you articulated, of bringing folks that don't have that and expanding your internal network and information and education so we learn more. And then, of course, that also happens by actually placing the veterans into the jobs that are working for those folks. So, John, did you have something you'd like to add from USA's perspective?
I think I'm just going to echo a little bit of what Brent was saying about the human touch. That's really important. So when we are reviewing a veteran's resume or even a spouse's resume, a lot of things, would not necessarily translate clearly, to Angel's point earlier, into what we might say in corporate America. So we're fortunate that we have veterans who are serving or who have served or are serving in the Guard or Reserves that are mixed in with our recruiting team. And so they're able to go ahead and look and advise a recruiter who may not be familiar with the military or fully understand what that spouse has gone through, and they're able to help them walk through that resume and interpret what that is. And that's a huge help for our recruiters who do not have that experience, or our hiring managers who have not gone that journey with a veteran or a spouse before. So just being able to leverage recruiters internally for us has been a big lift. But you don't have to confine yourself just to that recruiting team. If you have an employee resource group, those folks can help advise, help you all think through that problem. How do you want to translate that military experience or that spouse's experience into what we're looking for today? So make sure that you're tapping into those resources as you have them available.
Yeah, and I don't mean to go back on this, but one of the other things, and you just made me kind of triggered my memory on something, is one of the other things that we're using in our veteran population is grabbing those guys, embedding them with our HR professionals, so that way they can serve as a little bit of a translator. So when an infantry platoon commander, how does that actually translate to a management position inside of Microsoft? Right. And so we've been using that population to kind of interpret a little bit to some of our HR professionals, and that's been pretty helpful as well.
That's all wonderful, thank you. And it kind of leads to a second question, almost a follow-on from Sam, and he's interested in understanding what you've designed in your companies in the world of management, leadership, or all the way down to your veteran recruiters, but what your veteran structure looks like from a management, recruiting, hiring perspective, just to kind of understand how you've shaped that environment and kind of how you value or how you've cracked the code. Because I know each of your three companies have done it a little differently. So can I take each of you to just take a moment and explain your structure and how you look at the veteran space at your companies? And we'll start with you, Brent.
Yeah, I think my predecessor, a gentleman named Gary Proffitt, did a good job when he first started standing up a formal veterans program about a decade ago in Walmart. There was a number of activities that Walmart was doing, but in a formal sense, we've taken the approach, and I think it's been very healthy for us because of our size, 1.5 million employees across the U.S., a scale that's really hard to do this if you didn't think through it, where we try to do things by, with, and through the business. So our veterans formal military programs team is 3 people inside of that 1.5 million. So that's myself, a program manager, and a project manager. And we work within the talent acquisition arm of the business, but we work through our corporate affairs office, we work through the different business units and the recruiters to really have it be something that's not this, parallel activity, but it's integrated into all of the functions that happen within the business, especially in that talent acquisition and all the cycle of sourcing and recruiting and onboarding. All that happens integrated within the professionals that do that within the business.
Thank you, and thanks for sharing that. So let's go to Microsoft, and Angel, can you kind of explain how Microsoft addresses this structure?
We're pretty, so Microsoft spends a lot of time and effort on diversity and inclusion kind of initiatives. And so we see our veteran population as one of the diverse populations that we have internally. And so there's a lot of encouragement internally for us to continue to connect with each other. We've got a lot of social groups inside of Microsoft that are by design kind of focused on, we've got a Marine group, we've got Army groups, we've got just veteran groups, we've got military spouse groups, and all of those are designed to provide each of those populations an ability to talk about what are promotion opportunities, compensation, different compensation models, in terms of giving the populations kind of the ability to just connect with each other and figure out ways that you can, expand your influence. Sometimes, there's actually been, when we started to have the techlash kind of pushback, an interesting thing that took place is the veteran population, one of those social groups actually reached out to the leadership of the company and said, hey, we're starting to see a little bit more of an uptick on some of the techlash internally in Microsoft. Can we be of help? And the leadership popped back and said, you know what, yes, this is a really, really good idea. Let's get together and let's figure out ways that we can have you be more active. And so I think the way that Microsoft has kind of cracked this nut is to just make sure that part of a kind of a typical diversity and inclusion initiative, just starting to give the opportunity and encourage internal participation with like groups.
Thank you. And again, we've seen 2 different approaches now. And so, John, can you show us an approach from USAA?
Yeah, when we think about hiring the veterans, a lot of it is, what are the skills that they're going to bring? And so we've hired, veterans all the way from the top of the house as, senior executives all the way down to the call centers, who, are the frontline people that are engaging with our membership, and what we really want to make sure is we're we're giving people good understanding as we're having that conversation with a veteran or a spouse. Here's what the role is, and here's what we're going to be looking for you to do, and helping them translate into what are the skills that they're bringing and what does that look like, and then plugging them in as quickly as we can with VetNet and helping them, immediately leverage that employee resource group to go ahead and start making connections and understanding, because particularly when we're thinking about a veteran who's making their first transition or a spouse who's landing their first role in corporate America, it's a little bit of a daunting task. So how do you help them land well and feel comfortable about that? And so we try to make sure that they have that ability to scale wherever they sit in the organization, to make those connections, to start talking with their peers and understanding exactly what that looks like. And then on the HR side of things, how do we help make sure that our hiring managers understand exactly what that person is going to be bringing to the table when they make that hiring decision? So there's a lot of conversation that we have internally, helping people to make sure that they know what they've just hired, and that they're going to be intentional and purposeful about giving them the opportunity to land well.
Thank you, John. And that's kind of interesting for me, because it kind of reinforces how we at DoD have looked at the external space. Our natural inclination in many cases is to build a one-size-fits-all or a common level of service that we provide to our 1.4 million service members, right? However, what we've recognized in the external space there, where you all live and work and where our veterans and transition service members are going to go to be part of your communities, everything is different, and it is shaped towards the culture, the needs, the products, the environment of where they're going to land. And so I think it's very helpful for our audience and for other folks to learn that you've got 3 agencies here that are highly successful in the space, highly committed in the space, have tangible results in numbers of veterans, numbers of spouses, and successes inside their companies, yet they all go about it differently. And so there's not a cookie cutter solution. What there is there's a menu, and that menu is available for folks to go and pick and choose from, to shape something that fits their culture, fits their employees, their leadership, their management. And I think the biggest part of that is having conversations like this and other places where we can share those different techniques, and then you build the one that works for you. And so with that, I'd like to go to another question. And this one is from, I believe, Aaron. And it has to do with military spouses. And the question is, some companies have taken and seen some legal sensitivities around the identification and the processes of hiring military spouses. Have you seen those type of sensitivities in identifying them and hiring inside your work? And if so, how did you address those, and perhaps advice you could give to other companies? Brett?
Yeah, I'll say I think you're exactly right. Now, just from a personal point of view, my wife is a military spouse we've been married 25 years this year and lived, I think, 17 different places. And a lot of times she would be reluctant to identify herself as a military spouse, knowing that somebody might not want to hire her, figuring she might be gone after a certain period of time. And of course, that's not what you want to do as a company. Walmart, what we do, identifying as a military spouse is voluntary as they come into the business, but we don't discourage that. And in taking it to quite the contrary, we have what we call the military family promise, that if you are a military spouse of a service member and that service member changes duty station, Walmart will find you a location at that new location, so that we will work to parallel transition that. We are able to do that because of our scale and where we're at across the country to some degree, and we know that's a luxury that we have, but we wanted to capitalize on that for this population. Look, if in 18 months, if we can hire nearly 20,000 military spouses into the company, not just those that are coming into the stores, but across the range of the business to include the buyers, the merchants, the supply chain, data and analytics, human resources roles, the number of roles in e-commerce. This is a huge opportunity for us to tap into this talent pool, and we know we need to do the right thing and keep doing the right thing in this regard.
Well, that's a great answer.
Yeah.
Angel?
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of dovetail off of that. I think this was one of those identifications that we made early on before we started the Microsoft, essentially the military spouse training program that we have. And one of the things that we out of the gate we knew we needed to do was identify companies, like Walmart, Usaa, some of the other companies that have a larger footprint that can afford to take on some of these spouses and then allow them the opportunity to move across the country. We initially kind of attacked this problem thinking that we're Microsoft, everybody can work remotely. This is not a big deal. And what we found was that most of the spouses weren't interested in working remotely or working from home. They wanted to get dressed every day. They wanted to go into an office, and they wanted to have, a career outside of their home. And so that introduced a little bit of a different, I don't want to say a problem set, but it introduced kind of one of those situations where we needed to, when we started to partner with other companies for this particular program, we needed to make sure that we had a really broad base of companies like they just described with Walmart, that we were able to say, hey, we'd like to start to pass on to you military spouses that are highly qualified and most of the time incredibly educated. Like some of these spouses have got, massive population of people with master's degrees. We just had a graduate who had a PhD. And it's crazy to think that there's someone with a PhD that's having a hard time finding work because she's being discriminated on because she's just a spouse and people are worried about employing her because she's going to leave after a few years. But the reality is there are companies out there that understand the value of this population and are willing to take the risk and are able to give them the ability to move as necessary. And so it's taken a little bit of work, but what we're trying to do is also empower these wives to say, be active in, partner with the right companies and be active in identifying yourself as a military spouse because there's great value in that. We see these spouses as not necessarily an issue because they have to move and more of an advantage that we're going to be able to have someone for a longer period of time because they don't mind, changing location of their profession.
Thank you. Those are both exciting approaches. John?
Yeah, so I'll capitalize on Angel's last comment there about, the value of that person. So when we think about in our call centers, we take 12, 16 weeks to train up a representative, and a lot of our most effective representatives happen to be military spouses. So we've had a significant investment into that training to know how to, work on the phones, multitask. And when that military spouse says, my husband, my wife is getting moved and PCSing, we want to retain that individual. We don't want that military spouse to leave us because we've made that training. They've demonstrated great success. And so we have implemented technology, and this was the driver for us to implement technology so that they can work remotely and work from home. It's not always easy and does take some adjustment both on the military spouse's side as well as the manager's side to understand how to work remotely. We've been tackling that issue and we will continue to address that. But we've seen great success being able to flex our operating model and our work model to accommodate those who need to go work remotely because we're recouping that investment in training. We have somebody that's been productive, that remains productive and remains committed. And there's also a secondary benefit, that person, who's the military spouse is able to talk about USAA out in the community in a location where we don't have any offices. We only have 6 regional offices at USAA, and so we're not everywhere. We're not like Walmart with a big footprint. So, but being able to get out there and have that word of mouth and talk about USAA and what we're doing, there's a secondary impact that we often don't think about that we actually get to realize.
Fantastic. Thank you all for that. And sadly, we're coming to the close of our time allocation here. And this particular opportunity to share things with the community about what you're doing and in the greater concept about what's in the realm of the possible in this veteran engagement space for veterans and their families. So having said that, I do want to articulate that there's a lot more questions out here. And if you send a question in on the webcast, between us, the conference board, and the panel members, and our team at DOD, we will get back and we will answer your questions. We'll coordinate things. We'll ensure that we've talked to all of you. So before we go to just the closeout, real quickly, just 1 minute from each of you, what's the last thought you want to leave our folks with? Brent?
I'll just tell a story that reinforces a point. 1 doesn't equal 1 on veterans. There's a whole range of different folks, just like the amount of people you have and positions you have in your company, that's what you're getting in the veteran community. I want to tell a story about one of ours, just to give you an example of what they did in the service may not equate to what they want to do aspirationally after the service or what a direct indication. We have a gentleman named Wendell Jackson who works at the distribution center near where we are in Bentonville. He was a military policeman, enlisted, worked his way up to becoming a staff sergeant, promotable, a range of jobs, ended up becoming an officer, got out as a captain after as a military policeman. He came into a distribution center. He's had 3 different jobs or 4 different jobs in that distribution center, to include a special projects manager to train all new associates on technology as it's integrated into it. And now he manages 160 associates on a night shift for that entire distribution center, which moves, I think, about 2 million pieces of equipment through, or 2 million items through that distribution center a day. Here's a person that an HR manager might not ever try to make those two fits together. So my parting, I guess, thoughts are, take a chance, hire a veteran, let them show you what they can do. They'll amaze you with it, and just let them run within your company, and they'll do great things for you.
John?
We have over 20% of our workforce are veterans or spouses, and we're really proud of that. We can't hire everybody that is making that transition, nor can Microsoft, nor can Walmart, the three of us, as much as we want to hire. And so your all's focus and attention to this is really important. And even if you just make one hire this year, that's going to help alleviate the problem. So, this is a team fight. This is something that none of us can solve alone, but all of us can solve together. So I thank you all for your time.
Thank you, John. Angel, take us home.
I'm just going to underscore what both of my colleagues have just said here. Take a chance on this population. You will not be disappointed. They're highly educated, incredibly flexible. They're loyal. They work outside of the scope of what their positions are. That this is a population that brings more to the table than you actually pay them for. So give them a chance, and just become part of the hiring process to get these guys on board. I'm telling you, you will absolutely not be disappointed with the decision that you make to hire a military spouse or a military service member.
Thank you all. And I've got 3 quick points to make with you about the conference board and some upcoming actions and initiatives. The first on your screen, what you see is they've got a brand new human capital benchmarking service. Tremendous potential. When they briefed me on this and I read about it, it sounds like the capacity there for learning and expanding your capabilities is amazing. So there's a website down there on the bottom that you can look at. And if you're one of the first 200 respondents, there's a benefit to being one of the first 200 in the game, like often is. And so go to that website and learn more about their new human capital benchmarking service. The second thing they've got is a really nice new podcast series that's going to be on human capital insights, kind of what we did here in a veteran-specific space, but broadening that aperture somewhat. And if you look at the bottom of that page there that's on your screen now, you'll see the website where you can go to and identify and pick which one of those different podcasts you want to participate in, to see, and to expand your capabilities. And then lastly, their 2020 Talent Acquisition Conference is coming up in October, a great opportunity for you to meet and to associate and to learn from others like you and to teach and share what you know to others like you. The information there for the registration is down at the bottom of the page at that web link. And those are 3 great opportunities. And there's, of course, there's a discount if you use this site and this code to go in and get that. So there's a wonderful opportunity for you to participate as well. So with that, I want to close out with just a couple of things. One, I am, of all people, blessed beyond measure. I'm blessed because of the space I work in, for the job that I get to do, and the wonderful people like you, Brent, Angel, and John, that are out there doing, and representative of all the other companies and all the other big, small, medium companies, for-profits, not-profits, agencies that are working in that ecosystem to make things better, not just for the service member, but for our communities, by taking and leveraging that talent that's part of us, that work for us, to make our communities, our companies better. I'm thankful for what you do. I'm thankful for what your companies do. I'm thankful for what your communities do. And for all the folks on the cast out there in the webcast, I'm thankful for what you do, for taking the time to listen, for taking the time to talk with us today, and giving us a chance to just share something with you. So with that, thank you all for being here. We're out of time, but we had a blast. Have a great day.